The flight attendant's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm going to ask you one last time, move to the back of the plane, or I will call security." Her words were sharp, dripping with condescension. Sfia Roberts, a black woman, remained as calm as ever, looking up at her. "I've already told you, I'm not moving," she said simply. Her tone was even, almost soothing, but there was an undeniable strength in it. She was being humiliated in front of everyone, but no one expected what would happen next. When the woman they thought was powerless stood up and revealed who she really was, the story would take a turn no one saw coming. If you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their color, hit the subscribe button now and tell us where you're watching from. The plane gleamed under the afternoon sun, its sleek design promising a luxurious journey for its passengers. Inside, the cabin was nothing short of opulent. Plush leather seats, gold accents, and an air of exclusivity that made everyone feel like royalty. Passengers moved with ease, their expensive luggage rolling behind them as they were ushered toward the sleek private jet waiting on the tarmac. Soon, they settled into their seats, some scrolling through their devices, others sipping champagne offered by the attentive flight crew. Soft ambient music played in the background. Among them was Sfia Roberts, a calm and composed woman in her late 30s, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and matching slacks. Sfia Roberts exuded understated elegance as she moved with quiet confidence, though she made no effort to draw attention to herself. Sfia Roberts entered the cabin with a calm presence that drew the attention of those nearby. Her steps were measured, and her gaze swept the room briefly before she made her way to her seat. Her journey wasn't just another trip, it was a mission to oversee her growing empire. Though no one on board knew who she was, she preferred it that way, for now. Olivia, the lead flight attendant, stood near the entrance, her crisp uniform perfectly tailored, her sharp features exuding control. She greeted the passengers one by one, her smile warm for some and colder for others. Olivia prided herself on keeping order on the plane, but her idea of order often depended on how people looked or behaved. Her welcoming tone subtly shifted as she greeted Sfia Roberts with a curt, "Welcome aboard." The warmth was noticeably absent. Behind Sfia Roberts sat Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, a couple in their 60s who exuded the ease of seasoned travelers. Mrs. Raymond clutched a small knitting bag, her fingers already twitching to begin her work, while Mr. Raymond carried a folded newspaper, his expression mild with curiosity as he took in the scene. Olivia's smile brightened for them. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. Lovely to have you with us again." Sfia Roberts glanced over her shoulder, noticing the stark contrast in Olivia's tone. Her expression remained calm, but her eyes reflected an awareness of the unspoken dynamics at play. As other passengers settled in, Olivia moved through the cabin, ensuring everything was in place. She checked on the Raymonds, offering them a bright smile. "Is there anything I can get for you before we take off?" Mrs. Raymond shook her head politely, absorbed in her knitting, while Mr. Raymond nodded toward his coffee, signaling that he was satisfied. When Olivia passed Sfia Roberts, her demeanor shifted again. She glanced at Sfia Roberts's bag resting neatly under the seat, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't offer the same courtesy or warmth, simply walking by without a word. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's attitude shifted based on appearances? Share your experience in the comments below and hit the subscribe button. Olivia Reed, in her early 40s, carried herself with the precision of someone who thrived on control. Her pristine uniform and perfectly coiffed hair matched her sharp demeanor. To Olivia, appearances mattered more than anything else, and her judgments were swift and unapologetic. Her eyes narrowed as she watched Sfia Roberts settle in. Something about Sfia Roberts didn't sit right with her, not her clothes, not her calm self-assurance, not the fact that she didn't immediately seek attention like many of the passengers Olivia deemed worthy of respect. In Olivia's mind, Sfia Roberts simply didn't belong. She approached Sfia Roberts with quick, purposeful strides, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her tone polite but dripping with condescension. "I think you're in the wrong section." Sfia Roberts glanced up at her, her expression calm. "I believe this is my seat," she replied, her voice steady. Olivia's smile didn't waver, but her tone sharpened. "I don't think so. This section is reserved for our elite passengers." Nearby, other passengers began to notice the exchange. A nosy socialite leaned slightly to get a better view, her curiosity piqued. A friendly businessman across the aisle glanced over, frowning slightly at Olivia's tone. Sfia Roberts remained composed, her gaze steady as she replied. "Before you go assuming, perhaps a quick glance at the passenger list might be in order," Sfia Roberts said calmly, her words cutting through the air with a quiet authority. Olivia's brows furrowed as her irritation surged, the sharpness in her voice unmistakable. "I don't need to check anything," she shot back, her tone laced with condescension. "I know who belongs here and who doesn't." The cabin fell into a tense silence as passengers exchanged uneasy glances. Whispers flickered between them, some pretending not to notice, others unsure of how to react. A voice from the crowd muttered, "Why doesn't she just move if she's in the wrong seat?" Another shrugged, adding, "Probably trying to sneak in for a free upgrade." Olivia crossed her arms, her posture rigid, a clear challenge in her gaze. "If you don't move to the back of the plane," she declared, her voice ringing out for all to hear, "I'll have no choice but to call security." Sfia Roberts, unshaken, tilted her head slightly, her calm demeanor never wavering. "Call whoever you need to," she said quietly, "but I'm not moving." A gasp rippled through the nearby passengers. The businessman across the aisle leaned forward, brow furrowed in concern. Olivia, her patience thinning, turned sharply to Alice, the junior flight attendant who had been watching nervously. "Alice," Olivia snapped, "escort her to the back now." Alice hesitated, caught between the tension in the air and her instinct to do what was right. She glanced at Sfia Roberts, who seemed almost serene, and then at Olivia, whose glare made her hesitate further. Reluctantly, Alice nodded and took a step forward. Sfia Roberts's voice rang out softly, carrying an almost imperceptible weight. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing." Olivia, unperturbed, scoffed dismissively, waving off the warning. "I know exactly what I'm doing. Now, get up." The exchange seemed to escalate with every word, the tension in the cabin thickening, palpable in the air. Passengers shifted in their seats, watching with bated breath. Olivia's patience was wearing thin, her voice louder as she demanded once again, "You're not supposed to be here." Sfia Roberts, undeterred, replied with quiet confidence, "You shouldn't make assumptions about people." Olivia's smile was thin and venomous as she fired back, "And you shouldn't sit in seats you didn't pay for." The tension reached a boiling point when Sfia Roberts, undisturbed by the growing murmurs and disdainful stares, took out her phone and typed something quickly. "You're making a mistake," she said simply, her voice unwavering, the words hanging in the air like a warning. Olivia didn't acknowledge the threat. Instead, she gestured sharply to Alice, who was now standing uncomfortably by the aisle. "Make her move," Olivia demanded, her tone now a little more desperate. Sfia Roberts, in contrast, remained still. Her calm demeanor was a force in itself, one that seemed to heighten Olivia's frustration. The cabin was dead silent, save for the soft hum of the plane's engines. Sfia Roberts looked up at Olivia, her gaze steady and firm. "I've already told you," she repeated, "I'm not moving." A few passengers were now openly watching the confrontation, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Olivia, seizing an opportunity, turned to address the entire cabin. "This is exactly why we have rules," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Some people just don't respect them." Sfia Roberts didn't flinch at the insults. She simply kept her focus on Olivia, her unwavering composure a silent defiance. "All I ask," she said quietly, "is to be treated with the same respect as everyone else." The socialite ahead of them whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "Looks like she's trying to sneak in for a free ride." Olivia, eager to latch onto any support, smirked at the comment. "Exactly," she said, turning to the other passengers, "this is exactly why we need rules." The tension in the cabin grew heavier, the silence only interrupted by Sfia Roberts's calm but powerful words. "If you think that's too much to ask, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." Alice, visibly uncomfortable, stepped forward hesitantly toward the passenger list, her fingers trembling as she scanned the names. But before she could speak up, Olivia's voice sliced through the air, sharp and reprimanding. "What are you doing, Alice?" Alice hesitated, her voice barely audible. "I was just checking," she began, but Olivia cut her off. "I've got this under control. You don't need to get involved." Alice, torn between doing what was right and fearing the consequences, retreated, flushed with embarrassment. Meanwhile, a businessman across the aisle, dressed in a sharp suit, leaned toward Sfia Roberts with a soft smile. "Excuse me, is everything all right?" Sfia Roberts turned to him, her expression softening. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, her voice steady, grateful for his small act of kindness. But Olivia, noticing the exchange, quickly interjected, her voice sharp and accusing. "Sir, I'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage the disturbance." The businessman, his tone even and calm, replied, "From where I'm sitting, you're the one making a scene." Olivia flushed with anger, her jaw tightening as she glared at Sfia Roberts. "I've had enough of this," she snapped. "Either you move, or I'll make sure you're escorted off this plane." Sfia Roberts met her gaze, unfazed. "You can try," she said softly, her calmness only adding fuel to Olivia's rage. Olivia's frustration continued to bubble over, her voice now shaking with anger. "Why don't you just admit you're in the wrong seat and stop wasting everyone's time?" Sfia Roberts didn't respond. She remained seated, her posture unyielding, her resolve clear. Olivia, seething, left Sfia Roberts to her seat, stomping down the aisle to tend to the other passengers. The tension lingered in the air like an electric charge, palpable and growing with each passing second. Sfia Roberts waited patiently for the service to resume, observing as Olivia passed by, serving drinks to the other passengers. But when it was Sfia Roberts's turn, Olivia made no effort to acknowledge her. Sfia Roberts's request for water was met with a curt, dismissive response, "I'll get to you when I can." Minutes passed, and Sfia Roberts, now growing more uncomfortable, shifted her position slightly, her legs stretching out into the aisle. Olivia, noticing the movement, took a deliberate step toward her, striking Sfia Roberts's leg with hers as she passed. The water on the tray spilled, splashing across Sfia Roberts's lap. Olivia gasped theatrically, raising her voice. "Watch where you're putting your legs," she snapped, the words sharp and accusatory. "You've caused a mess." Sfia Roberts looked up, startled, but still composed. "But you walked into my leg," she said quietly. Her gaze was steady as she looked up at Olivia, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. "I've only asked to be treated with the same respect as everyone else," she said, her tone soft but firm. "If that's too much to ask, maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." Olivia, enraged, stepped forward, her frustration boiling over. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she hissed, her voice laced with venom. And then, in a moment that stunned everyone, Olivia raised her hand and slapped Sfia Roberts across the face. The sound echoed through the cabin like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the passengers. The room went still, the air thick with disbelief. Olivia's mind raced, and a knot of unease formed in her stomach. She couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she'd misjudged everything. The glares from the passengers, Alice's wide-eyed horror, and Sfia Roberts's unyielding calm, none of it was what Olivia had expected. She had assumed control, but now she was starting to feel the weight of her actions. What if Sfia Roberts wasn't just some ordinary passenger? The calm confidence, the quiet authority, it didn't match the image Olivia had built up in her mind. For the first time, doubt crept in, eroding her anger like a slow tide. The passengers were no longer on her side. The businessman, who had previously observed with detached interest, now met Olivia's gaze with a silent judgment, his arms crossed in disapproval. The nosy socialite whispered to her companion, shaking her head in disbelief. Even Alice, trembling with uncertainty, clutched the passenger list as if it could offer her an escape from the mounting tension. Sfia Roberts, however, remained unmoved, her posture relaxed but unwavering, a picture of silent defiance. Her calm demeanor spoke volumes, volumes Olivia didn't want to hear. Sfia Roberts had done nothing but sit quietly, yet she now radiated a presence so powerful that Olivia felt as though the walls of the cabin were closing in. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. Sfia Roberts wasn't going to engage in a petty fight. She had already set her plan in motion. Olivia's unease grew sharper, her frustration boiling as she tried to regain control of the situation, but her efforts were futile. Just as Olivia's irritation reached its peak, Sfia Roberts subtly reached for her phone. Every movement was deliberate, calculated. Sfia Roberts typed something quickly, then set the phone back down beside her, her gaze never wavering. The small gesture carried so much weight, it made Olivia glance uneasily at the device. What was she doing? Olivia demanded, her voice sharp with suspicion. Sfia Roberts didn't answer immediately, only leaning back in her seat, her calm tone cutting through the tension. "You'll find out soon enough," she said softly, her words hanging in the air, carrying a power that sent chills down Olivia's spine. A hushed silence fell over the cabin, the hum of the engines the only sound breaking the stillness. Passengers exchanged furtive glances, their whispers rising like an undercurrent. The nosy socialite leaned closer to her companion, her voice barely a murmur. "What's going on? Do you think she's someone important?" The businessman, still seated across the aisle, nodded as though he had already figured it out. A knowing look passed between him and Sfia Roberts. He tapped his fingers against the armrest, his gaze fixed on Sfia Roberts as though the pieces had clicked into place. Then, a sharp sound broke the tension, the sound of hurried footsteps. The cockpit door opened, and the pilot appeared, his face pale, his movements swift and purposeful. He walked directly toward Olivia, his posture tense, as if he were bracing for something explosive. Olivia, irritated and confused, turned to face him. "What's going on?" she demanded, her tone sharp, but with a hint of uncertainty. The pilot stopped in front of her, his voice low but firm. "You need to step aside," he said, his discomfort clear but undeniable. Olivia's confusion deepened, her arms folding across her chest. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "Why would I need to step aside? I'm handling this." The pilot's gaze flicked briefly to Sfia Roberts before returning to Olivia. "I just received a call from management," he explained, his voice steady. "The owner of the plane is on board. She's Miss Williams." He pointed directly at Sfia Roberts. The room fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the passengers like a wave. The nosy socialite inhaled sharply, her disbelief palpable. "She owns the plane?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The businessman nodded, an air of quiet satisfaction crossing his face. "I had a feeling," he muttered, as though he had suspected this all along. Alice, standing near the galley, froze in place. Her heart raced as the reality of the situation sank in. Sfia Roberts wasn't just another passenger, she was someone with immense power. Olivia, now visibly shaken, turned to the pilot, her face flushed with embarrassment. "That can't be true," she stammered, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "There must be some mistake." The cabin was thick with tension, the silence pressing in on Olivia from all sides. Sfia Roberts remained seated, unflinching, her expression calm as ever. She crossed her legs, her gaze unwavering as she looked at Olivia. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't acted out. Sfia Roberts's quiet strength was a stark contrast to Olivia's crumbling composure. Olivia, who had once been the one in control, now felt the floor shift beneath her feet. And it was too late to turn back. The discomfort around her was palpable. Sfia Roberts remained seated, poised and composed, her posture as immaculate as ever. Then, without warning, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled landing. Please remain seated and prepare for descent." A murmur of confusion swept through the cabin. The businessman leaned towards Sfia Roberts, whispering urgently, "What's happening? Why are we landing?" Sfia Roberts didn't respond, her expression serene, unreadable. Olivia's brow furrowed as her confidence began to falter. She glanced nervously toward the front of the cabin, her unease mounting. The plane touched down smoothly, its descent almost too calm for the tension in the air. Moments later, a sleek black SUV pulled up directly onto the tarmac. The doors opened, and two sharply dressed assistants stepped out. Their movements were quick, purposeful, exuding an air of quiet authority. They ascended the plane's stairs with a commanding presence, drawing the attention of everyone in the cabin. As they entered, one of them spoke respectfully, "Miss Williams," their voice warm yet formal. "Everything is ready for your review." Gasps echoed throughout the cabin. Olivia froze, her face draining of color as the truth hit her like a crashing wave. "Miss Williams," she whispered, her voice barely audible, the realization hitting her hard. The assistants ignored her entirely, their focus on Sfia Roberts. "Do you need anything before we proceed?" one of them asked, their tone deferential. Sfia Roberts stood slowly, her movements graceful, deliberate. She adjusted her blazer, her calm demeanor radiating an undeniable power. The passengers watched in stunned silence, the weight of the moment settling over the cabin like a heavy fog. Sfia Roberts finally spoke, her voice steady and commanding. "I'm Sfia Roberts," she said, her gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm the owner of this plane, and I also own this airline." Olivia's mouth hung open, but no words came out. The confident, condescending flight attendant who had once held all the power was now a mere shadow of herself, her earlier bravado replaced by sheer panic. Sfia Roberts turned her attention to Olivia, her voice soft but sharp, like a blade cutting through the silence. "Olivia," she said, her tone unwavering, "your behavior today has been nothing short of disgraceful." Her words sliced through the air. "You've humiliated yourself, mistreated a passenger, and tarnished the reputation of this airline." Olivia stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know." Sfia Roberts held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't know because you never bothered to treat me with the respect every passenger deserves," she said firmly. "Instead, you made assumptions, acted with prejudice, and escalated a situation that could have been resolved with basic decency." The passengers nodded in agreement, their earlier silence giving way to murmurs of support. Mr. Raymond folded his newspaper with quiet satisfaction, offering Sfia Roberts an approving nod. Sfia Roberts' poised figure stood tall as she looked directly at Olivia, her gaze unwavering. "There's no mistake in your actions, Olivia," she said, her voice calm but carrying an authority that commanded silence from the entire cabin. Olivia's eyes darted desperately around the room, seeking support, but no one came to her defense. The passengers watched silently, some even discreetly raising their phones, capturing every moment of her humiliation. Sfia Roberts took a step closer to Olivia, her voice steady. "While you were busy judging me, you failed to do your job. Your job is to treat every passenger with respect, no matter who they are or what you assume about them. And now, there are consequences." Olivia's hands clenched at her sides, her mind racing. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but no words came. She could feel the weight of everyone's gaze upon her, and for the first time, her confidence completely evaporated. Sfia Roberts gestured toward the pilot, her voice firm. "I want this addressed immediately," she said. "And I want to ensure this never happens again to anyone." The pilot nodded, his demeanor professional. "Understood, Miss Williams," he replied. Olivia took a step back, her heart pounding. She glanced toward the exit, her instincts screaming at her to flee before things got any worse. But before she could move, the pilot stepped directly into her path, his expression firm. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Sfia Roberts' gaze remained locked on Olivia, her voice calm but unwavering. "Olivia, your actions today have proven you are unfit for this position. Effective immediately, you are fired." The words hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. She staggered back, her face crumpling with shock and disbelief. "Please, Miss Williams," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean." Sfia Roberts' expression hardened. "You didn't mean to get caught," she said coldly, "but you did. And now, you will face the consequences." At that moment, two uniformed police officers boarded the plane, their presence sending a ripple of murmurs through the cabin. Olivia's face turned ashen as they approached Sfia Roberts. "Miss Williams," one of the officers said respectfully. "We received your report. Are you pressing charges?" Sfia Roberts' gaze was unwavering. "Yes," she said firmly. "This individual assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. I expect her to be held accountable," Olivia gasped, stepping back in panic. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding," she cried, her voice desperate. "I didn't mean." The officer stepped forward, producing a pair of handcuffs. "Ma'am," he said, "you're under arrest for assault. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Olivia's breathing quickened as the reality of the situation hit her like a freight train. She had no way out. All eyes flicked to Sfia Roberts, who stood calm and composed, her presence a stark contrast to Olivia's unraveling demeanor. Trouble had arrived, and Olivia knew she couldn't escape it. This was just the beginning of her reckoning. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Olivia's hands were cuffed behind her back, tears streaming down her face as she desperately tried to protest. "Please, Miss Williams, I'm sorry," she sobbed. Sfia Roberts' expression remained impassive. "Your apology means nothing without accountability," she said quietly. "You made your choices. Now you'll face the consequences." The passengers sat frozen, their eyes locked on Olivia as she was escorted down the aisle. The once confident flight attendant had been reduced to a defeated figure, her arrogance replaced by shame and regret. Sfia Roberts turned back to the cabin, her voice steady as she addressed the passengers. "To everyone here," Sfia Roberts said, "I apologize for what you had to witness today. This is not the standard of service I expect on my planes. Moving forward, we will ensure that every passenger is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The cabin erupted into applause, with passengers clapping enthusiastically. Mr. Raymond gave a small cheer, while Mrs. Raymond, putting aside her knitting, clapped politely. Sfia Roberts turned toward Alice, the younger flight attendant who had quietly supported her throughout the ordeal. "Alice," Sfia Roberts said, her tone softening, "I noticed your professionalism today. Thank you for stepping up when it mattered. You'll be hearing from my office about a promotion." Alice's eyes widened, her face lighting up with gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Williams," she said softly, her voice filled with awe. Sfia Roberts smiled briefly before stepping toward the exit, her assistant following closely behind. The atmosphere on the plane had shifted completely, the earlier tension replaced by a sense of relief and admiration. Justice had been served, and Sfia Roberts had set an example no one on that flight would soon forget. As Sfia Roberts descended the plane's steps, she paused to take in the fresh air of the tarmac. The sleek black SUV waited, its driver holding the door open. Her assistants walked beside her, briefing her on her next meeting, but Sfia Roberts' thoughts lingered on the events of the day. Later, in a televised interview, Sfia Roberts sat in a sleek studio, her composure as impeccable as always. The interviewer leaned forward, clearly captivated. "Miss Williams," the interviewer said, "your story has gone viral. Millions of people have seen how you handled this situation. What message do you hope to send?" Sfia Roberts's gaze was steady as she answered, her voice clear and resolute. "Respect is a right, not a privilege," she said. "Everyone deserves dignity, no matter their appearance, background, or what others assume about them. True leadership is about setting that standard and ensuring it's upheld." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. "And what would you say to those who face similar challenges, but don't have a platform like yours?" Sfia Roberts's expression softened. "I'd say that strength comes from within. Even when you feel invisible, remember your worth. You don't need a title or wealth to demand respect, you just need to stand firm in who you are." A few weeks later, Sfia Roberts boarded another flight, greeted by a different crew. This time, the energy was warm, welcoming, and professional. The lead flight attendant smiled genuinely as she greeted Sfia Roberts. "Welcome aboard, Miss Williams. It's an honor to have you." Sfia Roberts returned the smile as she settled into her seat. The atmosphere was lighter, the service impeccable, but more importantly, it was filled with respect. As she gazed out the window, watching the runway blur into the sky, a sense of peace washed over her. The events of that day had left a lasting impact, not just on the passengers and crew who witnessed it, but on everyone who had seen the story unfold. Sfia Roberts knew that her actions had transformed an injustice into a lesson, one that would ripple far beyond that single flight. She smiled, knowing that sometimes, the most powerful victories weren't about winning, they were about inspiring change. As the passengers settled into their seats, Sfia Roberts quietly reached for her phone. In the aftermath of what had transpired, she understood that this wasn't just about her, it was about changing a system that allowed prejudice and assumptions to thrive. As the jet climbed higher into the clouds, Sfia Roberts settled into her seat at the front of the plane. The window beside her framed a breathtaking view of the horizon, the world below fading into a sea of blue and white. She gazed out at the endless sky, a sense of tranquility washing over her. This wasn't just about confronting prejudice or asserting her authority. It was about turning a moment of humiliation into a powerful lesson, one that would ripple far beyond this flight. Sfia Roberts smiled to herself, her reflection faintly visible in the window. She knew this was only the beginning. With every decision, every policy, and every act of leadership, she was shaping a future where respect and kindness weren't the exception, but the standard. The plane soared higher, its engines humming softly as it made its way to its destination. Seated at the helm of her vision, Sfia Roberts felt a quiet triumph, a sense of accomplishment no turbulence could ever shake. Shortly after the flight, Sfia Roberts released a public statement that captured the world's attention. In a heartfelt video, which quickly went viral, she spoke directly to the masses. "Luxury isn't about appearances," Sfia Roberts said, her voice unwavering. "It's about the experience we create for everyone. True success is measured not by what you can afford, but by how you treat others." Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations across social media. "This is why I'm implementing new policies across my airline to ensure that every passenger, no matter who they are, feels valued and respected." The statement quickly became a movement. Hashtags like #respect above all and #Sfia Roberts' vision trended for days, inspiring people to reflect on their own behavior and biases. Sfia Roberts' leadership had sparked a ripple effect, motivating others to consider how they could contribute to a world where kindness and respect came first. If you love this story, Sfia Roberts concluded, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with those around you.